Hey there everybody, welcome to Auto Bears, and this is the Ford Kuga plug-in hybrid. Now, Ford are a brand that are synonymous with making good all-round cars. They tend to be practical, comfortable, affordable, but most importantly, really good fun to drive. And the Kuga was no exception. It had a nice practical edge about it, but when you chucked it into the corners, yeah, it did put a smile on your face. And then for the second generation, of course, the car got bigger and the looks got a bit more grown up, but it still had that sporty look about it. Now, for this latest generation Kuga, they have ditched the diesel and they've injected a bit of hybridization into the range. So you can now get your Kuga as a full hybrid, or as I've got here, a plug-in hybrid. And believe it or not, the plug-in hybrid Kuga was actually the best-selling plug-in in Europe in 2021. So I've had this Ford Kuga for a week and, well, I better find out what all the fuss is about. Now, when it comes to the Kuga's looks, I'm going to be honest, I think Ford have played it a bit too safe. Now, granted, yes, at certain angles it looks like a big version of a Fiesta or a Ford Focus, but it just doesn't have that sporty look of the previous generation, which is a bit disappointing. And also, if you were to put this side by side to a Hyundai Tucson, the Tucson wins hands down. And I've actually got the ST Line X edition, which means it comes with all the sporty paraphernalia. We've got the 19-inch alloy wheels, we've got all the little black inserts at the front and rear of the car, but it just doesn't make it look as, I don't know, as sporty as the previous generation. But that's just my opinion. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. But I do love this fusion red paint scheme, and I actually think it stands out with this kind of bold metallic colour. And on that note, I think that's enough of looking at the outside of this new Kuga. Let's have a little look at the inside. Sat in the front of the Ford Kuga, you are greeted by a very comfortable, well kitted out and familiar interior, especially if you own any modern day Fords. Now, because this is a medium-sized SUV, getting in and out of the Kuga is really easy because of that raised seating position. So if you do suffer from any kind of mobility issues, then this is definitely one family SUV to look at. Now, something I do love is the fact that we have got the pop-out door protectors, which are really handy when you're in the car park, so it means you're not going to exchange paint samples with the car next to you. So I really love that feature. And then once you're sat in the driver's seat, you find that the seats themselves are very comfortable, but not as supportive as I was expecting, especially when you chuck the Kuga into the corners, you're not really held in place. So that was something I was a little bit disappointed with. Now, I have got electric adjustment on this front seat, and it's also got lumbar support as well, and also the steering, where I have got rake and reach adjustments. So getting the perfect driving position in the Kuga is really easy. Now, interior quality in the Kuga is, yeah, it's actually pretty good. It does feel very much like a Ford in terms of the interior materials that are being used. So we have got soft touch plastics here on top of the dash and also on top of the doors. We have got some kind of faux carbon trim here, just to kind of show you you're in the ST Line version. A bit more squidgy soft plastics here on the centre part of the dash, but when you go lower down, yes, they are a little bit hard, but I do love the fact we've got some leatherette here on the centre console, so it's nice to rest your knee against on a long journey. So I do like that feature. Cubby spaces in the Kuga are actually really good. We've got some decent sized door pockets, and they're not lined with any fabric, so yes, loose items will rattle around a bit, but there's actually space for 2 bottles in there, and I do like the way it has been laid out. And then what we've got on the centre console is we've got a wireless charging pad here, and next to it we have got a little space where you could perhaps put a wallet or some keys. We've also got a USB, USB-C and 12-volt socket, so actually you could charge 4 mobile devices at the same time in that little cubby area. Then we've got 2 cup holders here, well technically 3 for an energy drink in the middle, and they are of a decent size, and I do like the way that they've got different heights, so it's not going to get in your way whilst you're driving. And then we've got a little tray area here which is rubber lined, and I really do like it, and you could put some loose chains on there and it won't slide around. And then I do love the centre armrest, which you can slide forward so you can rest your arm on longer journeys. And then when you open it up, you find you've got yourself a little tray, which is really handy, and we've got a good bit of space in there and another 12-volt socket. However, some rivals have got a bit more space in there, so that's just something to be aware of. And then we have got the glove box, which is actually of a decent size. Again, it's not lined with any fabric, but again, it's better than something like a Hyundai Tucson, where the book pack takes up about 3/4 of the space, but in here, the book pack is much smaller, so I really do like that. And then finally, we've got a little spot up here to put your sunglasses, so that is handy. Something I do like is that Ford haven't gone the way of Volkswagen Group just yet, where everything's operated via the touchscreen. We still have plenty of physical buttons in here. So just below the infotainment screen, we got a couple of rotary dials, plus a few shortcut buttons to navigate the menus. Then below there we have got dual zone climate control, and there is a plethora of buttons here, but it is easy to manage and operate whilst you're on the move. We have got things like your fan direction, auto, max aircon, and then underneath we got the buttons that we do like, which is the quick clear screen, which is what Ford are famous for nowadays. We've also got a heated steering wheel and heated front seats, so that is really handy. Then we have got a little rotary knob for the gear shifter, so we've got park, reverse, neutral and drive, and then there's a button in the middle which says L, and that basically operates the regen braking. So that is quite handy, but you kind of expect the parking button to be in the middle, but anyway, it's a minor quibble, but it's still there, nice and easy to reach. Then we have got an electric handbrake and your auto hold, and then just behind there we've got a couple more buttons. So one of them operates your drive mode, we've got your EV mode, we've got your self-parking, and we've also got your front and rear parking sensors. So all those buttons there are nice and handy here on the center console. Then we have got a few more buttons here on the right hand side underneath the air vent. Now mostly it's for the light operations and the fog lights, however there are two buttons here. One of them operates opening the boot and the other one the petrol filler cap. And they're quite small and quite close together, so if you're not too familiar with a Kuga, you might end up hitting the wrong button and you'll end up opening the boot when you actually want to do the petrol filler cap, and vice versa. But that's only a minor quibble, but again it's quite nice to get physical buttons here in the Kuga. Now on the steering wheel we have again got some buttons on there as well. Now on the left hand side it operates the adaptive cruise control, also your volume controls as well. And then on the right hand side we have got your head up display controls, a little function there to operate the driver data on the digital dash, and then we have got your kind of track select and also your voice function. So it's quite nice and handy and easy to use and operate whilst you're on the move. So I do like that again in the Kuga. Now the infotainment screen is Ford's Sync 3 system, and it's an 8-inch touchscreen set high up on the dash. And I can't believe I'm going to say this, but it just feels very small on the dashboard there. I can't believe we're in a world where 8 inches is too small. Anyway, double entendre aside, it's nice and responsive, it is easy to use when you're on the move, and you have got Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Then in front of the steering wheel we have got a just over 12-inch digital dash display, and there is actually a really good amount of information on there. Sometimes, yes, you can be a little bit overloaded, but it is easy to read and easy to use when you're on the move. So that is something I do like, and you can kind of customize a number of the features on there, which is really handy. And something I do like is some of the animations as well. They're quite subtle, but it does have a nice kind of, a nice feeling about it when you kind of go through the various driver mode displays. So yeah, all in all, I really am enjoying the front of the Kuga. It's a very comfortable place to be. I just wish these seats were a little bit more supportive, especially when I'm chucking the Kuga around corners. And, well, before the camera gets completely soaked, let's have a little look at those back seats. Sat in the back of the Ford Kuga, it's actually really nice and spacious back here. Now the first feature I'm going to show you, because as you can see I am sat bolt upright, is the fact we've got a little ratchet handle here and I can slide the seat back, so that is really handy. Now I know I'm on the other side of the car, but it's only for that kind of demonstration. But that passenger seat is set to my driving position. I'm 5'7" tall and 5'7" wide, and as you can see I've got a really good amount of knee room, and headroom is pretty good as well. However, if you are over 6 foot tall, you might find your head just rubbing against the ceiling. Now, cubby spaces are pretty good in the back of the Kuga as well. We've got some okay sized door bins. You can get a small to medium-ish sized bottle of drink in there, but it's not lined with any fabric, so loose items will rattle around a bit. We've got our aeroplane style pockets on the backs of the front seats, and we've also got a centre armrest with a couple of additional cup holders in there, which is really handy. Now also back here it's not devoid of features. The outer seats are heated and are operated using a button here on the back of the centre console, and we've also got a 3-pin socket back here, which is quite surprising. I would kind of prefer to have had perhaps 2 USB charging ports, but well, that's Ford's decision anyway. Now the windows are of a nice square size, they do allow a lot of light in, however they don't open all the way down, which is a little bit disappointing. The other thing I really do like as well is that you can actually slide the bench forward to increase boot space for you. So there's actually a lot of versatility to the Ford Kuga, which I really do like. But yeah, I could easily see myself sat here in the back of the Kuga on a long journey, possibly with just 2 adults back here. I wouldn't try and get 3 because it would be quite narrow, but easily you can get 3 kids back here. So yeah, I'm actually really impressed back here, and I think it's now time we have a little look at that boot. Now, opening the boot of the Ford Kuga presents you with 412 litres of space, which is actually quite poor for this class of car. To give you a comparison, the Hyundai Tucson plug-in has a 558 litre boot and the Toyota RAV4 plug-in a 520 litre. But looking on the positives, we have got a nice flat load area, and it is nice and wide and square, so you can get a couple of suitcases or a few weekend bags thrown in. Now, it's not devoid of features either. We got some sturdy tethering hooks, we've got a 12-volt socket and a couple of handles in order to get the rear seats down, which is really handy. And what I do like is under the boot floor, we have actually got a spare wheel, and that's something you don't see very often. But it is just a little bit disappointing that it's not as competitive or as practical as some of its rivals, but it does make up with it as well for that versatility with the reclining rear seats and also the fact that the bench slides forward as well. So yeah, all in all, it's absolutely fine for the family, but it's just not the best in class. And I think on that note, it's time that we take this Ford Kuga for a drive. So once you get driving in the Kuga, first impressions are really positive. It feels lovely and comfortable and easy to drive. Refinement is pretty good as well. Now, because this is a mid-sized SUV, visibility is pretty good, and we've got a brilliant view of the road ahead. The A-pillars are quite thick, but I've not found myself looking around them at any junctions, and if I look over my shoulder, I haven't got the thickest of C-pillars, which means that all-round visibility is good. And looking out actually behind me now, yeah, I got really good visibility out the back of the Kuga also. So yeah, all in all, visibility is really good, and first impressions of this new Kuga are really good as well. I mean, it's, yeah, shaping up to be a very good family SUV. Now, when it comes to trim levels, in the Kuga range, there are technically 4.5 to choose from, I'll say. You've got the entry-level Z-Tech, the Titanium, you've got the ST Line and the ST Line Cross Edition, which is what I've got here, and the top-of-the-range Vinale. Now, if you go for the Z-Tech and the Titanium, you cannot get hybrid versions of the Kuga. It's petrol engine only. It's only if you go up to the ST Line and upwards that you get the choice of having the full hybrid or the plug-in hybrid, which is what I've got here. Now, my pick of the range, if you're after a hybrid, would be the ST Line and ST Line Cross Edition, because you just get all the kit that you would absolutely need for day-to-day driving. And I do love the fact that you get things like the heated front seats and heated steering wheel on this uprated version of the ST Line. Of course, you can go for some of the options packs, where you get things like the heads-up display, wireless charging and self-parking, but that just depends if you want those on your car. But if you just stick with the standard trim levels, you get all the kit you really need. So yeah, that would be my recommendation, the ST Line or the Cross Edition. You decide. Now, there's only one engine to choose from in the Kuga range. It's a 2.5 litre 4-cylinder petrol engine, and if you go for just the petrol version of the Kuga, you've got about 148 brake horsepower. The full hybrid version of the Kuga, about 187 brake horsepower, and this plug-in version of the Kuga, you get 223 brake horsepower, which is quite impressive. Now, 0 to 60 takes around about 9 seconds, and that's not the quickest in its class, although it does drive with a bit of urgency, which I do like. However, something like the MG HS plug-in is actually quicker to 60 than the Kuga, which is surprising. And all three cars, or all three versions, come with front-wheel drive. There's no all-wheel drive version available, and you get a CVT gearbox with the hybrid versions of the Kuga. Now, before you recoil in horror, the CVT gearbox is actually really good. I'm actually really impressed by it. Now, yes, if I put my foot down, you do get that engine drone coming into the cabin, but it's not too intrusive, and it's very rare that you're going to be kind of putting your foot down like that and driving it like a bat out of hell. And when you're just driving along, tooling along day to day, it's really lovely. It holds on to the, I'll say, the revs as you're kind of driving along, and acceleration is nice and smooth and progressive. I'm actually really impressed by it. It's not as good as the latest generation Lexus NX, what they've done with their eCVT gearbox, but for day-to-day driving, I'm still really impressed by it for a CVT. Now, with this being a plug-in hybrid, it means that we can drive for a few miles purely on electric power alone. And with the 14.4 kilowatt hour battery, we can get, as Ford say, up to 35 miles of driving purely in EV mode, and I do believe them. Now, depending on the conditions that you charge the battery, you can get some different readouts. So on average, I have been getting 35 miles of range when I've charged it up to 100%. On a couple of occasions it has said 32, and on one occasion it did say 37 and then touched 38. But 35 should be reasonable, and you should be able to get that driving around day to day. And the fact that the average daily commute is, as a round trip, 23 miles, does mean that you shouldn't really need to use that petrol engine, and you can just drive purely on electric power alone, so that is a bonus. Now, of course, with these plug-in hybrids, you get the big MPG figure, and with the Kuga, it's no exception. So Ford claim that I should be able to get just over 200 miles per gallon. Yeah, I've not managed to do that. However, if I am driving with the battery completely depleted, I am getting around the 40s and a little bit above when it comes to MPG, which I actually think is pretty good for a car that weighs 1.8 tons. Now, I have done a couple of long trips, approximately 90 miles, about 2 hours of driving, and I actually averaged around 73 miles per gallon, and I was actually really impressed by that. That wasn't a figure I was expecting to hit in the Kuga. But of course, the more you drive and you drive in electric mode, then yes, those MPG figures will go up. But don't forget, very quickly, yeah, you're going to run out of juice in the battery, and then the engine will kick in, and then those figures start to drop. So that's just something to be aware of when you're driving the Kuga. But in terms of day-to-day driving, you should be able to get some very respectable figures in regards to your MPG. So as I mentioned earlier, we have got a 14.4 kilowatt hour battery, which gives you that up to 35 miles of range driving purely in electric mode. Now, when it comes to charging that battery, as I said, you can use the petrol engine and the regen braking when it depletes down to 0. But if you are looking to charge it properly, because it is a plug-in hybrid, it will take you about 3.5 hours via a 7 kilowatt charger and around 6 hours using a 3-pin socket. So that's actually not too bad, and basically will mean that you'll just end up charging it overnight once you get back from work. And yeah, it's just very handy. And where the charging port is actually on the passenger side, and it's actually on the front wing. So it is quite handy when it comes to the location of the charging port. So yeah, I really do like that, and it does flash up to let you know it's charging and when it's completed. Again, another highlight here in the Kuga. So what's the ride and handling like in the Kuga? Well, ride-wise, I've been pretty impressed by it. It deals with the bumps and imperfections really well. It feels comfortable driving around day to day. The only thing I have noticed is that it is a little bit firmer and a bit stiffer than I was expecting. And as a result, driving over some of these A roads, I can kind of bobble around a bit, and my wobbly bits start wobbling as I go over some of the bumps and imperfections. But it's not uncomfortable. The only thing I do say is, and I mentioned this earlier, is that I wish there was a little bit more side bolstering in the seats to hold me in place, especially if I'm driving over an uneven surface. And because of the fact that the Kuga is actually a fun car to drive and you want to chuck it into corners, yeah, you just want to be held in place a little bit more. Now, refinement is actually really good as well. You get a little bit of tyre roar coming into the cabin when you're driving purely in EV mode, and then when you have got the engine, well, for the most part you can't hear it, but yes, if you put your foot down, you do get that little engine drone coming into the cabin. But as I said, you're not really going to be driving it like that. Of course, you're going to drive it with a bit of enthusiasm, but you're not going to be racing around wanting that responsiveness from the engine, because it's not a sporty SUV, unfortunately. It kind of feels as though, yes, the fun factor is there, but it's not properly sporty, if that makes sense. Now, when it comes to the Kuga's handling, this is a highlight, and of course, being a Ford, you know it's going to handle really well. The steering has got a nice amount of weight to it. It actually feels very keen and eager and responsive in your hand, and as a result, the Kuga actually it's really nippy around town, especially when in EV mode and it just kind of wants to get going really quickly. And as a result, you can chuck it into corners with a bit of confidence. Now, in these greasy conditions, because of the fact it weighs around 1,800 kilos, it will start to push wide and understeer because of the fact it's front wheel drive only. So that's just something to be aware of. But I like the fact as well, there's very little in the way of body roll and it does feel very composed. However, there is a downside to this kind of keen and eager feel in the steering, and that is that there's a lack of feel there. And as a result, there is kind of an arcade game feel about it, and that's also for two reasons. Firstly, because of the fact it's very keen and eager to respond, and secondly, as I push it through here, the steering really wants to kind of recenter itself as quickly as possible. It almost feels very spring-like in your hands. And the first time I experienced this was actually in the latest generation Fiesta ST. It just felt a little unnatural that it wanted to recenter itself that kind of eagerly. And as a result, you do get that kind of arcade game feel about it. And it does mean as well that you don't have the best amount of feel with the front wheels in regards to the steering feel. So yeah, although it is actually really keen and eager, and it does put a smile on your face because it's actually really responsive and you can chuck it into the corners, it doesn't feel as natural to chuck it into the corners and as sporty as something like a Seat Ateca. That really is the king of the handling family SUVs. But just chucking it into the corners now, it's just very composed, it's happy to do it, and yeah, you will get the smile and the rewards on your face. It's just a shame that it's just lacking that kind of feel to make it natural. But other than that, for day-to-day driving, it's brilliant. Now, of course, with these type of SUVs, you get your various drive modes, and usually you get Eco, Normal, and Sport. But with the Kuga, you get two additional ones. One of them is Slippery, where basically you deal with conditions like this, or if it's icy, and the other one is Snow and Sand, which I'm very keen to see what it would be like, because it is front wheel drive only, so I'd love to know how it would get you out of those tricky situations when you've got snow and ice. I mean, I think perhaps winter tyres will help, definitely for snow, but yeah, it'd be interesting to see how that would work. Obviously, I'm not going to try it in this car, but yeah, being front wheel drive, I'm not sure how that would help, but let me know if you have got a Kuga, how that works. Now, along with the drive modes, you've also got various EV modes or hybrid modes. So the first one is auto. So basically you're letting the car do what it wants to do, whether it be using the engine, whether it be driving purely in electric, or a combination of the two. Next we have EV only, which, well, does exactly what it says on the tin and just makes the car drive in EV only. So therefore you can make use of those 35 miles of potential range. Next we have kind of, well, EV hold, I should say, where basically you drive around using the petrol engine and then later on it will engage the battery for you. So that way you can kind of charge it up, if you will. But then the final one is actually a battery hold, where you use the engine and the regen braking to charge up the battery. Now that's a really nice feature. I do like that, and it doesn't take too long to start getting the miles filling up that battery for you as you're driving along. But it does actually mean then that you're just driving along using the petrol engine, which does hit your MPG figures. Also as well, it's a little bit different to something like the Hyundai Tucson, which has a really nice feature that I really do like, where even though it says 0 miles of range, there's still just shy of a quarter of a battery available. And what it does is it turns into kind of a full hybrid, or even a mild hybrid. So as you drive around at slow speed in, say, town and villages and stuff, it will drive in EV mode. It won't kind of resort to using the petrol engine to charge up the battery. So I really do like that feature on the Tucson, but it is just a shame you don't have it here on the Kuga. When it gets to 0, that's it, you're done. The battery is empty. You start charging it up using the petrol engine and the regen braking, but you've still got to carry those extra what, 50, 60 kilos of weight, and essentially it's dead weight because you can't use any of the battery power as of yet because it's still charging up. So it's a couple of good features in regards to the kind of hybridization and the charging features on the Kuga, but perhaps not as versatile as some of its rivals. So with my time in the Kuga, what have been some of the highlights and some of the low points that I've experienced reviewing it this week? Well, highlights have definitely been the kit levels and have been the safety tech, especially when you turn on the adaptive cruise control, because it really does take a lot of the stress out of doing a long range drive. So it is actually a really nice feature there. However, a downside to the safety systems is they can be a little bit sensitive. And I have noticed that with the lane keep assist, if it can't see any of the white lines, it gives you a little bing to let you know that it can't find them, which is absolutely fine. But it doesn't let you know when it has found the lane again. So sometimes you can be driving along and all of a sudden you can just feel that steering input come in from the lane keep assist, but you kind of already thought it had disconnected. So that's just something to be aware of. Also, as I mentioned, I would like the seats to be a little bit more supportive, especially because as you chuck the Kuga around the corners, it just doesn't hold on to you as well as some other cars out there. And also, finally, there's kind of the interior design. It's starting to feel a little bit dated. We've got newer models and rivals out there which just feel much more plush and up-to-date compared to the Kuga. And I think Ford have just tried to be really safe with it, and I think they should have been bold. They should have really taken a chance with it, because the Kuga was going to sell really well. It's not really been like a poor model in the Ford range and Ford lineup. But in contrast, the fact is, it's obviously doing something right, because this was the best-selling the best-selling plug-in in Europe in 2021. So that's nothing to kind of turn your nose up on. But yeah, that's pretty much it here in the Kuga. I mean, it is a very good all-round family SUV. It is very frugal as well. It's just like a typical Ford. It's just good in lots of areas, but in other areas, not so good. So what are my thoughts on the Ford Kuga plug-in hybrid? Well, I can understand why this was the best-selling plug-in in Europe last year. I mean, it ticks all the boxes. It's very frugal, it's affordable, it's practical, and it's really good to drive. And kind of standing on its own, those merits are absolutely brilliant. But when you put it next to rivals, you start to see where it loses out. I mean, the interior doesn't feel as premium as, say, a Hyundai Tucson. And on that note as well, the boot isn't as big as well, so it loses out in terms of practicality. But if you're after a good all-round, or a very good all-round plug-in hybrid, then this is the one to go for. If you don't mind spending just a little bit extra money on something that feels a bit more special, go for the Hyundai Tucson. And if you want something that's just not going to break down on you, go for the Toyota RAV4. And that's also got the best in class when it comes to EV only range. I think that's over 40 miles, which is hugely impressive. But yeah, if you're just after a really good plug-in hybrid family SUV, go for the Kuga. But just be aware, there are better cars out there. So everyone, I hope you've enjoyed this review of the Ford Kuga PHEV. As always, please don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell notifications icon to let you know when I, Dave the Auto Bear, bring out a new video. If you've got any questions or comments about the Kuga, please put them down below and I'll do my utmost to respond to them. Of course, I am on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, and I always advise you follow me on there for additional content, including live videos and still images. So guys, I hope you're having a great day. I hope you're staying safe, washing your hands, wearing a mask and maintaining your social distancing. And I will catch you all in the next video. So take care everyone, and bye-bye.